Hello there, it's Jan here from JB Crafts. Thank you for joining me on my channel today, and I'm back with another Take 5 challenge. So I sort of started this last month, and it's just again a little bit of inspiration for you guys. I know sometimes, and I do it occasionally, I sit down at my craft desk and I think, oh, what am I going to do today? Unless I've got a specific idea in my head, it's like sometimes that blank space, you think, oh, where am I going to go today? So the idea of this challenge was to just give you some thought starters about what you might want to use on your card. And I've called it a scrap buster today because I actually delved well into my scraps, and all the papers and everything that I've used on my card today are from the scrap box. So take 5 means take 5 items. Now it can be any 5 items. I've just gone with basic ideas here for my 1 to 5, but you could translate this into any sort of mediums, any themes, any sort of, whether you're a journal maker, whether you're a scrapbooker, whether you're a mixed media artist. It's just a thought starter to get you going. So I wrote down that most projects want some sort of background, whether this is a paper background, whether it's an ink background, whether it's stenciled, so many different ways of making backgrounds. I've included a die and a stamp, some form of embellishment, and most of our projects have a sentiment on. So nice, easy things that we're all probably used to using. And even if you're a beginner, you can put together something really simple that doesn't have to be sort of overwhelming. Finishing touches, as always, the gems are on the list, and I've got an insert ready to pop inside our card. So popping into the scrap box, I thought we'd go for a nice warm tone. Seeing as spring's arrived, or it's supposedly arrived, I've gone for a nice warm tone today, and it's fairly monochromatic what I'm going to make today, which means that they're all shades of the same family. So we're going to use some scrap, and I'm going to use some inks for stamping that I've pulled out, mainly inspired by this particular paper. This is an old one that was in my scrap bag, and I've pulled out Wild Honey to pick out the yellow tones and Rusty Hinge for the more sort of orangey tones in there. So yeah, really nice colour scheme today. Those are my pieces that I'm going to be using on the card, and this is what I made. It's a 7x5 design. And as I say, very, very straightforward. We've got some layers in the background. I've used my die to make the frame, and I've got a little bit of a decal edge going on the piece here, although I did cover some of it up. I've used my stamped image with the inks. I've got a couple of embellishments to balance it out, and I've got my sentiment on a piece of vellum here. So yeah, nice and simple. Paper scraps in the background. The die is the frame and the edging. The stamped image is that lovely floral collage. We've got a flower and a butterfly as an embellishment, and then we've got the best wishes on the vellum there for the sentiment strip. So I'm going to show you how I've popped it together. As I say, nice and straightforward. Just pop these over to one side, and as I said, I've got these sort of scraps ready. Just prepared them ready. I had a look through the scrap box to just see this one. I wanted to use twice, so I'd got a larger piece because this was the other half of what's on here. So rather than do the whole thing, I thought, right, I need to cut it in half, which left me a gap. So you could leave it at this. You could have that lovely decal edge showing. You might want that on this side, and then you might want to colour block something over here. So this piece could actually go under this side. I actually decided that I wanted this on the left, and I'm going to slot this one underneath here like so. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to stick these together at the right size for my design. So I'm going to use a little bit of tape. And this one's actually cut down. We started off with the 7x5 standard card size, and I've cut this one down to 6 3/4 in height, which is 1/4 of an inch different, and it's approximately 3.5 inches wide, but that depends on your scraps. It doesn't have to be, you could do half and half. You might have the narrower bit here and the wider bit. It depends what's in your scrap box. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop a piece of my double-sided tape along this edge that I've cut, and I'll show you the die that I used to cut this. This is out of a collection of dies from Crafter's Companion, and there were just 2 or 3 little edge dies in it, and it just gives you that lovely decal edge here. So it's quite a long one. I just used it to cut. You can see the edge of my paper there where I've cut, and I've just got that little bit of definition, adding that pop of interest. As I say, we are going to cover a section of it, but you'll still be able to see it peeking out at the top and the bottom, and then I'll go through the other dies when we get to them. So if I take this off here, what I want to do is position these so that we've got them in the right place on the card. So this one is going to leave a tiny border around the edge here. And then this one, I want to create that same border at this side and just get them lined up to create my panel that will be 6 3/4 inches by 4 3/4 inches. That one's decided to wriggle. Let's just pop that back there. Yep. So just by popping those together now, I've got a panel that would normally be, more often than not, just one paper. This was another scrap out of the scrap box, and I've just cut this down. It measures 4 inches tall by 1 3/4, but again, for this one, the measurements aren't that important. And then I've used one of my fancy decorative punches to just pop the edges on there, been round the outside of this with some ink, and rounded the corners at this side just to soften it a little bit under here. I didn't like that angled corner. It was not sort of, apart from the card blank, it wasn't going with anything. So yeah, I've just rounded the corners, and this one's going to go on the top here when we're ready. In fact, we can probably stick that one down. So I'm just going to grab some of my collal. The reason I haven't stuck the main piece down yet is because I want to pop that vellum round it with the sentiment on. So let me just pop this one in position. So a little bit of my all-purpose glue on the back here. And then I want the decorative corners on the left-hand side. And I'm just going to go for approximately 1/2 inch across the top and down the side that's visible of that pattern paper underneath, and just get that one in place. And then I've cut my my pieces ready to stamp on, and I've cut the decorative frame out of some matte gold cardstock there. That was a nice compliment, and this one had got some gold foiling on it, so I thought, yeah, those are nice warm colours. The gold just goes with that nicely. And I've then cut a panel that's going to fit inside here and just nestle inside it, and that's what we're going to stamp on in a second. We're going to pop our stamped image on here. So I'll pop that one to one side for a minute. I just want to use this as a positioner, and then we can get that vellum stuck down. So I am going to do a little tiny bit of my glue dots just to get this in place, and I've stamped out my sentiment here. And I use, because it's vellum, I use the Stays On ink, and it's one of my favourite stamp sets. Again, you know, rummaging through the stash, you know, the ethos of the channel here is to use what we've got. We've all got so much craft stash. I probably won't get through all of this in my lifetime. So yeah, delve through what you've got. And this one I've had a long time. It's a visible image stamp set. I just love the cursive font, and I've taken the Best Wishes and stamped it on my vellum with the Stays On ink so that we've got that permanent ink there. And then I'm going to wrap this, but I just want to tuck the edge, which is why I've got everything positioned here, just under the edge of the frame when it's in place. So now I know where that wants to go. I'm going to lift this up, just move it across a little bit there, and then I'm going to pop it round the back of the panel and give it a stick down. So I'm just going to use my dot runner on the back here and get that stuck in place, and then I can stretch this across the width of the card there, and then when I'm happy with that, we can go again on this side. Okay, now I have actually got a little bit of tape on this one, so I'm just going to lift that up, and I can use that one to stick my vellum down, and we'll trim off those excess pieces so that they're not in the way. That one's not so bad because it's stuck down. Okay, so now we've got this at the ready, and then my frame will just seal the top edge of the vellum there. Okay, so I'm not going to pop that on just yet. I am actually going to do the background now. So we've got step one with our background, and we've also included our sentiment as well there. So now I've got this going. I don't know why I've got tape on that bit and not on the other bit, but my mind works in mysterious ways. So we'll take the tape off there, and we will add some all-purpose glue to the other side that doesn't have any tape. So just pop this on here. Make sure that we've got all those sides sealed, a little bit over the vellum there, and then this one can just sit now on the front of my card. So again, there's just a nice border all the way around the edge of it, just to show the white card there. And I'm just going to wriggle that into place, and then once I'm happy with that, we can get it stuck down. Perfect. Okay, so we'll pop that aside to dry, and then I'm going to work on my little panel that we created. So we've got the frame. I want to do some stamping on here next. So let's bring in the stamping platform. And I've got my stamp out at the ready, and this is actually from a collage set. Again, I think I picked this up off Amazon, and there's 4 lovely stamps. I chose this one. It's got a little bit of, you know that I like the numbers. Love the text in the background. It's almost like a, you know, a collage one already done for you. I often do this with separate stamps, but I really like the idea that these were already done. They caught my eye when I was shopping on Amazon one. I'm fairly certain they'll be from Amazon. So yeah, I've got that one out at the ready. I'm going to pop this in the centre because we're going to stamp off the edge of the panel. The panel is smaller than the stamp, so I'm going to go right off the edge. So I'm going to pop this right in the centre here with some little glue dots on the back so that it doesn't move. And then I can position my stamp. And I want a little bit of white space in this corner, so I'm going to bring it off that bottom corner a little bit here, like so. So I've got a bit overhanging off the left and a bit overhanging off the bottom, and then it's created that little bit of white space around it. Pick it up with the stamping platform door, and then what we're going to do is we're going to use a couple of inks. So I've got my Wild Honey. I'm going to ink it up with that one first, and these are oxide inks which do stamp out really nicely. So I'm going to ink it up generously with that one. And then I'm going to give it a stamp. Okay, and I'm just going to bring in my little pressure tool and just let that ink transfer. It's a piece of smooth stamping card that I've got inside here. So just let that ink transfer nicely. And we can see the depth of the colour there and see whether that's sufficient. I think I'm going to give it another coat just to bring out the depth in there and bring that sort of brightness. So again, just ink it up with the Wild Honey, like so. Give that another press, and that's just going to build up those layers of colour. And you may want to leave it at that, you know, if you want to choose a coloured ink, and it can be any ink, it doesn't have to be oxide inks, anything that you've got in your stash. Something that just complements the paper scraps that you've got, and pop it on like so. And then what I want to do is add a little bit of gradient towards the bottom of it. So I'm not going to clean this just yet. I'm going to use my rusty hinge, and I'm going to come across about the bottom third of the stamp. And again, just ink it up nice and generously, preferably on the stamp jan. Let's just get rid of that because I'm going to end up covered in it. There we go. And then so that I don't get a really harsh line where the two meet, just going to use my finger dauber and just soften that top edge where that orange ink is, so that it blends nicely into that lovely gold that we did with the wild honey. And then again, we're going to pop this down, add a little bit of pressure. And this is the beauty of having the stamping platforms, because you can be confident that it's going to go straight over the top. And again, I'm just going to add another layer just to bring out that depth of colour. So again, exactly the same on there. Bring in that little finger dauber. And this, as I say, it just stops having that harsh sort of division between one colour and the other, where the ink pads have got that straight edge. So yeah, just softening it out with that little finger dauber, and then we will pop that down, and that should be my stamping complete. There we go. Beautiful. And then because these are oxide inks, I usually just give it a spray. And if you've got some spare cards, you could do an extra stamp with this and get that lovely watercolour effect. But for the purpose of today, I am just going to give it a clean off with my very mucky cloth that's getting ready for a wash. And that's it. That's as much as my stamps usually get. And then this one will just peel off because it's only the dots. We'll pop that one away. And we've got our nice little panel now that's good to go on the top of here. Okay. Beautiful. Now, I didn't ink the edges this time. That may be a surprise to some of you that follow me regularly. You know that I love my ink edges, but I love the crispness of this, and I didn't want to detract from the actual stamp by sort of inking the edges and drawing the eye. So I've left it white this time just for a change, and I'm actually going to pop a little bit of double-sided adhesive on here. So I've got my roll. It was a very large roll. It is decreasing because I use it a lot. This is sticks to adhesive, and I'm going to pop 3 pieces on the back here and just raise it that little bit. If this is only 1mm tape, so even if you wanted to post or mail something like this, it's not going to create a massive problem. But if you wanted to keep it flat, it would just look equally as nice. And then any spare that I've got left, I usually just use one of my sheets that's got my sticky dots on, pop it on there, and that can be used at another occasion. So let's have a look then. We bring in the card. I got giddy with the tape. I did some of the things with tape here, but not all of them apparently. So I'm just going to take this is just normal double-sided tape. This is not any foam tape. This is a flat one, and I'm just going to bring this in place for the actual panel here. So I want this to go roughly in line with the design that I punched into the edge here. I'm going to use that as a guideline and just tipping over the edge of the vellum to seal it. So I'm going to go sort of about there. I think it's just caught the edge of the vellum, and give that a press down, and then we can take our release paper from the double-sided foam and get rid of that. And then this one's just going to nestle nicely into the top of that frame there. So I'm going to lift it so that I can see, because my frame's got a lovely pierce detail around the edge, and I want to get it nice and centered. So I am just going to lift it slightly so that I can position that, rather than hovering over the top and getting my head in the shot there. And there we go. So again, you may want to leave it there. So let's just have a little look how we've got so far. We've used our paper scraps to create the background on number 1. I've used the metal dies to create that bit of an edge, but mainly the frame die there. We've got our lovely collage stamped image. We need a couple of embellishments, and we've got our sentiment on there. So embellishment wise, I literally just used a flower and a butterfly. I just wanted something to offset, and it's just a plain little flower die, anything that you've got in your stash, and a leaf. I've done the flower in some scrap of that peachy tone, and then I've done the leaves in gold as a nod to the frame there. And then the butterfly, he actually lives, I'm saying he lives, he's flown away. He'd be there, oh, he's there in front of me. Yeah, this is one again that doesn't go away. It's an old, I think this is an old Sizzix die, and I've got some magnetic strips at the side of me on my desk, and some of the dies just sit on there, especially little embellishment dies like this. So again, I've popped some pearls in the centre there. We're going to use the embellishment glue and pop the butterfly on the top corner of the frame. Oops, that was very rude. My glue pot's spitting at me there. And that one's going to go on the top edge. And then we're going to bring this one down here. But I think I'm going to pop a couple of little foam pieces under this one. Because we've got foam here, I'm actually going to double up a couple of the little circle foam dots here and pop this on the corner of that frame just to complement the butterfly. So I'm going to double them like so, so that it's got a little bit of height to it because it's coming up level with this one. And I'm going to add a tiny little dot of glue on this one because it's going to land on the shiny surface. And then we can get this one positioned just on that corner like so. Nope, let's hit the frame jam. There we go, that's better. Yeah, so we've got our nice little leaves there. I popped a pearl in the centre of the flower just to match the ones on here. And that's pretty much, apart from the gems and the insert, which we'll do on the main card that I made, but that's pretty much my design there. So we've got paper scraps in the background, the frame die, the decal edge die, the collage, my embellishments of the flower and the butterfly, and then we've got the best wishes. So we've done our 5 items, and then the only thing that I've done to finish on this one is I've added some gold gems. So let me just pop that one to dry. So I've got a couple up here in that top corner, and then I've just scattered 3 again, just drawing your eye over that sentiment. And then my insert is just a piece of smooth white cardstock, and I've just stamped that same image, but I've done it very lightly. So I've this one we built up with a couple of layers. I've only done it once here with the same idea, with that gradient going down into the darker ink, and then I've just popped another sentiment across the middle. And this one measures 6 3/4 by 4 3/4, and it's just going to nestle nicely inside there. So again, that all-purpose glue for this one, I've been around the edge of it just with what ink was left on my little finger dauber, just so that it stands away from the back of the card there. I know it's an extra layer, not everybody likes to do this. You can do this straight into the back of the card if you wish. I just like to give that little bit of stability, and I like that edging round it as well. So yeah, just an extra layer. Matches the weight that you've put on the front of the card, so it gives it a nice even weight distribution when you come to stand it. And as I say, I like the edges so that it just stands off, but again, straight on the back of the card if that's your thing. And that's my card design for today for that Take 5 challenge. So I hope you've enjoyed that one. As I say, nice and straightforward, brilliant for the scrap busting. You know, delve in there, see what you've got. We've always got bits left over from paper. For example, this is something else that I was working on, and I've got sort of little pieces left, you know. So anything like this, pop it in that scrap box and pop it out, you know, pull it out, have a look what you've got, look at what works together. It's the same as this. I've got little bits left here. These were bits that I've cut off the length of this piece in the background. So again, these will go back into that orange section and they'll be used on a later date. So nothing ever really goes far away. But that is my Take 5 challenge today. So if you've enjoyed that one, consider giving it a thumbs up for me. It does help with the channel. I love reading your comments. I do try and acknowledge that on the channel. And I will be back very soon with a new tutorial for you. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye now.